Hello, my dear friends. You're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 1st of December of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk, of course, about Marinka, because according to information we have, the city, after 20 months of clashes, after more than 20 months of clashes, has fallen. The Russians established control, complete and full control over this territory. Of course, some sources are saying that there are still a lot of job to do for the Russians, that Ukrainians still have some rearguard forces in the north, let's say eastern part of the western part of the village. Some sources are saying that the Russians managed to establish control over just the southern part. So a lot of speculations, lots of talks, and many other things. But if you want to hear my opinion, I would say that Ukrainians took a decision to step back, to withdraw their positions, because according to Zelensky, according to new Ukrainian doctrine, they're planning and they're trying to save the manpower. And this is a very interesting situation, because if you remember, during the previous few days, the Ukrainians visited significant number of cities and towns like Kherson, Kupyansk, Zaporozhye, and he was talking a lot with Ukrainian military authorities. And after that, he made a video when he was talking about the need of creation of the next defense belt behind Marinka, behind Avdiivka, and many other cities that are currently under the Russian fire and Russian attack operations. So this is the situation, and this is another step, another thing from Zelensky in fighting with Zaluzhny, because you need to understand one thing. A few weeks ago, there were a lot of reports from Ukrainian side that Zaluzhny doesn't have plans for the next year. Zaluzhny doesn't know what to do. Zaluzhny lost the battle for Zaporozhye and so on. After that, we see Zelensky moves along the combat line, and after that, we see that Ukrainian soldiers from Marinka are withdrawing their positions. So obviously the Ukrainian military authorities, the Zelensky office, tries to create the picture that Zelensky is good, that he visited the cities, they visited the front lines, he realized the problem, and he ordered the Ukrainian soldiers to withdraw their positions from the ruins, from Avdiivka, from cauldrons, from from fields towards more reliable positions, and that he, Zelensky, ordered, not Zaluzhny, who doesn't have plan, but Zelensky ordered the Ukrainians to start building more and more trenches. So he's trying to, this is a PR move. Zelensky basically tried to increase his value, and he wants to have some rehabilitation in face of Ukrainian soldiers, because he understands that Ukrainians support Zaluzhny and the Ukrainian soldiers mainly. And when we're talking about Marinka once again, according to information we have, the Russian 103rd Motor Rifle Regiment, just for you to know their icon, how they look like, 103rd Motor Rifle Regiment established full control over Marinka, forcing the Ukrainians to step back. And this video we got right before start making this video. According to this video, this is the guys from 103rd Regiment. They were saying that Marinka completely cleared and under Russian control. One more time, if you want to hear my opinion, the Ukrainians were forced to step back from the ruins because there were no possibilities to control Marinka, and not just that. The Ukrainians, during the previous weeks when the Russians launched their greatest offensive operation in the vicinity of Avdiivka, were focused just on one thing. They were building new defense belt in the vicinity of Georgievka, Kurakhova, in the vicinity behind Avdiivka, in Selidova, and so on, many other towns. And now the Ukrainians withdrawing. So the question is, why the Ukrainians withdrawing? This is more important question, because if you ask my opinion, the Ukrainians were fighting for Marinka for more than 20 months, and the ruins and so on wasn't a barrier, it wasn't kind of barrier that stopped the Ukrainians from sending more and more infantry inside of the western part of Marinka with attempts to fight with the Russians and to die. So the question, why the Ukrainians took a decision to withdraw their position, and the answer is very simple. So let's add arrows. The Ukrainians left towards Georgievka. There are very high chances that Ukrainians have some rearguard forces in this area. The main purpose of these rearguard forces is to secure the evacuation of the main troops and forces towards more reliable positions. Now, once again, why the Ukrainians took a decision to step back. And the answer to this question is very simple. The Ukrainians failed mobilization process. The Ukrainians can't launch another mobilization. They can't launch the mobilization among young boys and girls and many other types of population, because he will be break. They're going to be military coup in this case. And this is not just the only thing. Another thing is that currently these days we got more updates about the Ukrainian losses. And for example, we have three sources, at least we have for this video three sources. And the first piece of information was provided by the Russian military expert Ryber. He reported that since the beginning of the special military operation, the Ukrainians lost 536,000 Ukrainian soldiers. More than 500,000 Ukrainians were killed or wounded during the special military operation. More than 200,000 were killed, 60 were missed, and so we see the numbers. Furthermore, Ryber reported that more than 800,000 are people that currently can't participate in the combat because of their wounded, they're under investigations, they're in a jail, and many other things. So around 1.5 million if Ukrainians are no longer able to continue the special military operation. This is the losses. This is the current losses. Of course, these 800,000 will return back in time, but now 1.5 million. And Zelensky understand, due to the significant losses, that the Ukrainians need to change their doctrine. And now they need to stop sending these mid-storms, and they need to save the manpower. They need to save their personnel. This is for him, from one side, objective, because he can't do mobilization, and from the other side, he wants the Ukrainian soldiers to understand and to feel and to believe that Zelensky is the one who stopped mid-assault operation, and that Zelensky is the one who started saving and protecting him personally, a soldier. Not Zaluzhny, who was sending the Ukrainians to the mid-attacks, but Zelensky. Obviously, this is basically just another PR step, media victory for Zelensky. He tried to get as much as possible from this situation. And for example, another report we got from the Ministry of Defense, and according to Minister of Defense of Russian Federation Shoigu, as a result of clashes during the previous half year since the beginning of the Ukrainian greatest counteroffensive operation in June, July, August, September, October, and November, the Ukrainians lost more than 125,000 soldiers. So significant number, obviously, and the Ukrainians, one more time, don't have any possibilities to continue these mid-storms. If you ask my opinion, I have my own numbers regarding the Ukrainian losses, and according to my estimations, the Ukrainians lost a little bit less than 300,000 soldiers. I built my estimations based on the Ministry of Defense report. So now let's move one more time to the situation on the ground, and first we're going to continue with Marinka. So the Ukrainians took a decision to withdraw, to step back from this small village, because they're no longer able to control, and they don't want just to waste their personnel for free. Furthermore, some updates are coming from Novomikhailivka. The Russians published at least 2 geolocations of how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces on the west, from their main positions on the south of Novomikhailivka and in Novomikhailivka itself. According to the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, the total Ukrainian losses during the previous 24 hours on the South Donetsk direction were around 105 soldiers and 7 armored vehicles. 95 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. So as you can see, the level of losses was very heavy, and basically the Russians are moving further in this direction, and the main purpose of the Russians is to increase the foothold on the south of Marinka. So obviously the Russians are planning and trying to establish control over this territory, and this will allow them to encircle, to create a bigger encirclement of southern part of Novomikhailivka, and furthermore the Russians will be able to establish complete fire control over the roads that goes from Konstantinovka to Novomikhailivka. Furthermore, from this perspective, if the Russians are lucky and they have a plan, they can also start offensive operation further in direction of Konstantinovka, with the purpose to cut the main supply road that goes from Konstantinovka and Ugledar. Why is that? Why is the Russians do have this plan or something like this? Everything depends on Marinka, at least depended. And now, because of the fact that Marinka fell and the Russians established complete control, now they can dig in deeper on the western part of Marinka. I don't think that the Russians need to continue offensive operation further, let's say in direction of Georgievka, Maximilianovka or Kurakhova. For now, the Russians need to short the front line to maintain their positions from the north to the south. And now, by securing the flank, they can start movement along this road first in direction of Pobeda, and then moving further in direction of Konstantinovka. So basically, as I understand, this is the Russian plan to encircle the Ukrainians in Novomikhailivka. The Russians made few attempts to storm the village, but all those attacks and attempts were repelled by the Ukrainians. The Russians had losses, and now they try to bypass this territory from the south and from the north. So we'll see. Obviously, the Russians currently have some momentum in this area, and they will try to improve their further positions. Now we are moving to Avdiivka area, and we got also a lot of updates from every single direction, from the western, from the northern, and from the southern. When talking about the western direction, the Russians published a video how they managed to discover another Ukrainian artillery system or tank or armored vehicle artillery system, as I see, in the village by the name of Toninke, and as a result of Krasnopol strike, accurate strike, that armored vehicle was destroyed. Very interesting geolocations are coming from Avdiivka itself, from the residential area. I'll remind you that according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes on Donetsk direction, including the area from, let's say, Avdiivka to Bakhmut, the Ukrainians lost 300 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and 4 artillery systems. On these scenes, we can see how the Russians were bombing these block by the name of Chimik with the FAB 500. Another interesting video are coming from the same area. On this video we can see some vehicles, some machines, some cars, and then we're gonna see explosion. The Russians are saying that they managed to discover the Ukrainians the positions of Ukrainian headquarters, maybe of some platoon or squad or maybe battalion. As you can see, there are lots of vehicles, maybe there was some ammo depot, and probably as a result of FPV drone strike, that headquarters, that base, small base, was destroyed, and with CFI. So obviously good result for the Russians during the previous 24 hours, at least on this direction. When talking about the northern area, very heavy clashes, as you can see, based on the geolocations, are taking place in the eastern part of Stepova. Most of the mappers have already updated this territory, or at least a part of this territory under Russian control, but now take a look at the number of Ukrainian geolocations, and we see that the situation is very difficult for the Russians. We will not watch every single video, but the Ukrainians made lots of attempts to attack. They attacked the Russian positions all over the territory and along the railways, in the village itself, on the way to the village. And the Russians do have losses. It's very difficult for the Russians to dig in deeper, but they don't have any other choices. They need to send more and more forces to increase and develop their positions, with the purpose to establish control not just over Stepov but over Berdichi. For example, on this video we can see how the Russian infantry were moving from Krasnogorovka to the tree line. Some soldiers were moving back. We see significant number of the signs of hot signs of bodies of soldiers, and this area got under heavy Ukrainian artillery fire. So the situation is very difficult. There are very heavy clashes, and I'll remind you that from the Ukrainian side, this is the area of responsibilities of 47th Mechanized Brigade. And recently the Ukrainians, to reinforce the 47th Mechanized Brigade, have redeployed in this area 116th Mechanized Brigade. So as I understand, the Ukrainians are losing up to a quarter or even up to half of battalion every single day, exactly on the Stepova direction. During the previous day we haven't received anything from the southern part. The Russians continue digging in deeper process, and they need some time, but obviously soon we're going to receive more updates of more Russian attempts to attack further deep inside of the Avdiivka sector. Now we are moving to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction, where we got also a lot of updates, and most of them are coming from the northern area. The Russians continue their offensive operation from 3 directions. The first one in direction of Bogdanovka, from the Berkhovka water reservoir, Dubova, Vasilievka, and once again another day in a row the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, they managed to bypass almost half of the village and establish control over the edge positions, and the Ukrainians were forced to step back closer to the canal. The same story we got along the railways. The Russians continue offensive operation, and they published few videos, geolocated videos of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian forces in the trenches along the tree lines. On this video we see Ukrainian positions, and FPV drone strike just attacked the position and probably managed to deal some damage. And the same story from the south. The Russians continue clashes for the tree lines that located on the northwest from Kromova. So as you can see, the Ukrainians also withdrawing their position. So we may ask, so why the Ukrainians are running from this area as well? And the answer is the same as we saw in Marinka. The Ukrainians took a decision to step back towards more reliable position. And when talking about Bakhmut area, there is just one reliable position in this area, and I'm talking about the line along canal. So this is the only barrier that can stop the Russians, at least for a while, at least to slow down them, because of course it's not something that the Russians are not able to cross or bypass, but the Russians for these purposes need time, equipment, engineering equipment, they need forces and so on, and they need to stay under heavy fire during this process all the time. So that's why, as I understand, for now at the first phase of the withdrawing process, the Ukrainians will try to establish control over the villages and the cities and the blocks along canal, and the next defense belt of the Ukrainian forces in this area is going to be this line, and they will try to hold this area as long as possible, and if they are defeated they will cross canal, and then they will try to hold defense along this area. Obviously, if situation continue to develop the same way, I'm talking about the failure in mobilization, no support from the Western countries, and the Ukrainian attempts and Zelensky attempts to get some media victory to save, and he will try to save personnel, the Ukrainians will step back according to this plan. And that means that the days of Ivanovska and Bogdanovka and Klishchiivka, this city Ivanovska, Bogdanov, Klishchiivka, are numbered. From Klishchiivka we got some geolocations how the special unit Akhmat continue storming and bombardment of this territory, which also means that soon this territory will be attacked, will be under another Russian attack. And you know that currently the Ukrainians are in defense state. As I understand, they have completely changed their doctrine, and the Ukrainians realize that for them, for now, it's better to save personnel. There is no need to fight for every single village. There is even no need to fight if it's not necessary for Konstantinovka, Pritiechina. There are still a lot of cities, villages, there are still a lot of territories to fight for, and as I understand, the next 2024 year is going to be completely different in comparison with the current year, when talking about the Ukrainian doctrine. And the Ukrainians also may try to stretch the Russian forces, because one thing is to have control over this territory. Let's say that is this front line is static. The Russians have the already static logistic and many other things, and let's assume that as a result of Russian attack and as a result of Ukrainian, let's say, operation, the Ukrainians will step back towards this line. Let's just assume. Imagine yourself what kind of problems the Russians will save if they will be forced to stretch their forces from current positions to this one. Of course, from one side this is a significant media victory, but from another side there are going to be lots of problems, and even this situation in a very short term situation can bring the Ukrainians more benefits than trying to fight along this static combat line, where the Russians have superiority in artilleries, in drones, in many other different types of warfare. Now we are moving to Lyman direction, where we also continue receiving a lot of updates. According to information we have, the Russians destroyed another bridge between Novolyubovka and Nevskaya. Very difficult to understand about this video. Maybe this is an old video, because there is snow almost. The entire Lyman is covered with snow, and as you can see there is a green grass, so maybe this is November or the late October, and maybe this event took place a few days ago. But no matter the situation, the Ukrainians also from Lyman direction reported that the engineering forces of 21st Mechanized Brigade arrived in this area with the purpose to create as many as possible new defense belt. This is probably the current defense belt. They're going to build another one along Zheribets River, and also the Ukrainians are, according to Zelensky, are planning to build another defense belt every single 5-6 kilometers from the eastern part of Ukraine to the western. So that means that they're going to step back slowly, step by step, and the main purpose of the Ukrainian new doctrine is to save their personnel and to reduce as much as possible the Russian forces during offensive operation. So we'll see what the Russians are going to do with this new doctrine. Obviously, they have some solutions, but I would like to see them in practice. When talking about Lyman area, the Ukrainians lost 65 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. And from Kupyansk direction, we also got a lot of updates. As we discussed this morning, we got update that the Russians established control over a small village by the name of Timkovka. The Ukrainians were forced to step back among fields, and obviously they're also going to retreat and withdraw their positions. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians still fighting in the northern part of Timkovka. We don't have like real updates, but the sources are saying that the 57th Brigade of Ukrainian forces have almost lost its combat capabilities. According to information we have, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 35 soldiers and 5 armored vehicles, including tanks. So the clashes in this area is very heavy as well, but we'll see what is going to be next. Now we're moving to Zaporozhye area. We see that this area, the activity in this area was reduced till zero, almost till nothing, just regular FPV drone strikes. I believe that Ukrainians will be forced to step back from this direction as well. But the benefit of this territory is that Ukrainians have already a very powerful defense built in Orekhov. This is very strong, big stronghold and fortification, so there is no need to step back, let's say, very deep inside of Ukrainian positions. They can just withdraw Robotyne, Verbova, and to try to hold the Russians along this line. Or maybe they will try to keep Robotyne, because for now, when talking about this territory, there are not many Russian forces on this direction, so they can try their luck and to hold this area as long as possible. A lot of updates, very interesting updates are coming from Kherson direction. First of all, I would like to share with you this video. According to information we have, the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian radar of S-300 system, air defense system, and as a result of Lancet strike, that system was destroyed. The most important from this video is that a few things. The Russians were using new type of drone with self-navigation, and the second thing is the distance of Russian fire. If we calculate the distance even from Energodar, for example, to this position, the Ukrainians' drone Lancet bypassed more than 90 kilometers. When talking about, let's say, edge position, if the Russians were attacking this area from the shore, obviously the Russians were sending the drone from much deeper positions. And we got, one more time, another video of Lancet strike against the Ukrainian positions, against Ukrainian aircraft Su-25 in Krivoy Rog military airfield. Some sources are saying that this is the fake aircraft, but one more time, the most important is that the Russians control this territory and do have possibility to destroy everything. I'll remind you that if we increase the numbers since the beginning of November, we're gonna see that in the vicinity of Zelenodolsk and Apostolovo, these cities, during the previous weeks, November, the Russians destroyed at least 2 or 3 radars and air defense systems in this area. This is first one. Few radars were destroyed in this area. Velika Kostramka, this is the first radar that was destroyed, and this is the second radar, or maybe equipment for the radar that was destroyed. And today we also, as we discussed just a few minutes ago, got an update that the Russians managed to discover and destroy another radar of S-300. So this air defense system and an air defense system of this territory was completely suppressed by the Russians Lancet, and now there are no problem for the Russians to start using missiles and to attack the entire Ukraine. And obviously this is going to take place during the next few weeks. When talking about original Kherson direction, according to the Russians, as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 105 soldiers and 7 armored vehicles. The situation for the Ukrainians in this area is critical, and the critical not because of the fact that Ukrainians are forced, that the Ukrainians had significant losses in Krinky. The situation critical is not because the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to develop the foothold. The most important that Ukrainians can't withdraw their positions, because this is going to be a very big media loss for the Ukrainians. Imagine yourself that at some day the Ukrainians took a decision to leave Krinky, and they will be forced to announce about this to Ukrainians, and then the Ukrainians may ask, and what was the price you pay for this area? And obviously we're talking not about the hundreds, we're talking about battalions or even brigades of Ukrainians who already were destroyed in this area. Furthermore, the Russians established complete control over Tyaginki. We have already discussed this video. They managed to shut down another Mi-8 helicopter in this village. And when talking about positions on the north, the Russians managed to discover another artillery system that Ukrainians were using to support their forces in Krinky. And as a result of Lancet strike, that artillery system was also destroyed. One more time. If we increase the number of updates, let's say from the 1st of November, just in this sector, we're gonna see that the Russians, that this entire situation is very good to the Russians. They don't want the Ukrainians to leave Krinky. If you ask a Russian general who's responsible for this territory, if he wants the Ukrainians to leave this area and if he wants to restore control over this territory, I believe he would say that no, I don't want. Because during the previous 2 months, they managed to destroy a significant number of Ukrainian artillery systems on their bank of the river, who was trying to support the Ukrainian forces in Krinky. Every single geolocation in this area is completely new episode, fresh episode of Lancet strikes against the Ukrainian artillery systems. Significant superiority and significant number of losses from the Ukrainian side. And I think that this is the reason why the Russians will continue keeping the situation, making some updates that the situation is difficult, but with one purpose: to force the Ukrainians to send more and more forces on this bank of the river. When talking about other front lines of this area, the Russians continue bombardments of Dachi, of these villages and so on. As you can see, the situation in this area is also very critical, but not so critical as in the vicinity of Krinky, where the Ukrainians managed to achieve and to advance something. But for now, it's just another media trap for Zelensky, and he doesn't know how to resolve this situation. So we'll see what is going to be next for him. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day.